Welcome to all of you guys here. Thanks for joining us, especially if you're online. And if you're new, welcome. Love to meet you today. We have something after service called Heritage in 5 that meets down front. Love to see you there. It is a new year, 2019, which means you made it. Congratulations. So that means just do everything you did in 2018 and you'll make it another year, right? It's not what anybody's hoping for. We want to see something new. And I love that our church has opened up with this 31 days of prayer together, because a series like this that we're doing, God's House, has some serious potential to make things never the same. And so keep the prayer coming. I love that we're doing that together. The series God's House, which is all about the foundation and the function of the church. Most of my Christmas was spent learning the function of my kids' Christmas toys. And one I didn't feel like was very complicated was one that Silas, my 3-year-old, got from his uncle and aunt, and it was a Spidey web shooter. It attaches to your hand, and oh, we were so excited. All you have to do is just look at the picture, right? And so I pop it out, and he's got his cousins, other 3- and 4-year-olds around, and I pull it out, and I see that it squirts right away, and man, their excitement was through the roof. I said, Silas, come on, give me your hand. And so, okay, put it on. I attach it. He starts spraying. He gets like one burst out, and then the can pops out. And all the kids are like, oh, it's okay. Just let me look at the picture. Okay, attach it again. Squirt, 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 and then the can breaks. I'm like, oh, this is killer. And then my sister-in-law, of course, like 20 minutes into it, is like, well, Aaron, did you read the instructions? I'm like, oh, yeah, that's right. Thank you. So I did what any humble dad would do who gets caught on not reading the instructions. And I throw her the box with the toy and say, you figure it out. By that time, I think the kids had lost interest in it altogether. And that's what I think happens with the church. See, the church is also supposed to have this excitement and this momentum and this interest in it. But if we don't look specifically at the instructions, specifically the heart of the church, as we will today, the heart behind the church, then we may get caught in the ups and the downs and lose excitement and maybe interest in it altogether ourselves. And so let's look at how the church functions. Obviously, we're going to Jesus. He's the founder of it. But Jesus was doing this through a group of people, through 12. He didn't start his church right away. He was developing these 12, and specifically this one, Peter, who would become the leader of the church. And so as we see how Jesus worked on the heart of Peter and how he formed it to the place to where he could get so that the church would then function from that heart, we see how we ourselves should be living with this heart as the church. And so we're going to start where Jesus and Peter meet, and that is in Luke chapter 5. On one occasion, while the crowd was pressing in on Jesus to hear the word of God, he was standing by the lake of Gennesaret, or the Sea of Galilee, and he saw 2 boats by the lake, but the fishermen had gone out of them and were washing their nets. Getting into one of the boats, which was Simon's, he asked him to put out a little from the land. And he sat down and taught the people from the boat. But when he had finished speaking, he said to Simon, put out into the deep and let down your nets for a catch. And Simon answered, Master, we toiled all night. We caught nothing. But at your word, I will let down the nets. And when they had done this, they enclosed a large number of fish, and their nets were breaking. They signaled to their partners in the other boat to come and help them, and they came and filled both the boats so that they began to sink. This is called a momentum shift in their fishing day. They thought they were done. And then Jesus shows up and flips it all upside down. Simon Peter saw it. He falls down at Jesus' knees, saying, Depart from me, for I am a sinful man, O Lord. For he and all who were with him were astonished. Everybody say astonished. At the catch of fish that they had taken. And so also were James and John, sons of Zebedee, who were partners with Simon. And Jesus said to Simon, Do not be afraid. From now on you will be catching men. And when they had brought their boats to land, they left everything and followed him. The title of this message reflects the motto in God's house, which is fishing is everything. Jesus only repeats one miracle with such detail, and it is this miracle of the miraculous catch of fish with the same man at the beginning, at his call to follow Jesus, and then also right before Jesus is ready to depart back to heaven, a miraculous catch of fish. And then the church that he leaves, and we see it launches, and in Acts 1 we see a catch of the Holy Spirit on a bunch of people speaking in their own language and catching people all around, and people hear them speaking about the mighty acts of God. And then Acts 2, we see the first miracle through Peter, where he delivers this message, this proclamation explaining who Jesus is and the Messiah and what they need to do as a result, and a miraculous catch of 3,000 people are saved that day, and not just 3,000 that are caught, but 3,000 that also themselves begin catching. Acts 2, 42 to 47. This is the church. They devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and the fellowship, to the breaking of bread and the prayers, and awe came upon every soul. Everybody say awe. Awe came upon every soul, and many wonders and signs were being done through the apostles. And all who believed were together and had all things in common, and they were selling their possessions and belongings and distributing the proceeds to all as any had need. And day by day, attending the temple together and breaking bread in their homes, they received their food with glad and generous hearts, praising God, having favor with all the people. And the Lord added to their number day by day those who were being saved. They kept getting bigger and bigger. It's very similar results as the fishing miracles, right? They cast, but the Lord's the one who added the number, who filled their nets. And we see the same effects of astonishment and awe and amazement from them casting love with joyful and generous hearts. Every day was a successful fishing day. And so the church's main function is its followers operating as fishers. Again, it wasn't coincidence that Jesus calls Peter and then commissions Peter with the same act, the same teaching, and then the church launches operating the same way. Understand, momentum was never meant to be lost. In this early church, what did they have? They devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching. They had a humility to learn. They were devoted, dependent on prayer, which was God's power. And they had everything in common, which means they didn't have a pride in their differences. And they're selling their possessions and giving to those who had need. Why? Because the greatest priority, their daily agenda, was to advance God's catch. Before we moved here to Georgia, we lived in Tampa, Clearwater area, and I had a friend, he called me up like a week before and said, Aaron, we got to go fishing one more time. And I was like, all right, man, we better catch some fish this time. And he's like, we will. Trust me, we're going all out. I've got a boat. We're going to go pick it up. And so we go to this neighbor that he had who had a boat. And we go, and I see that it doesn't have a motor on it. I'm like, this is going to be a really fun fishing day. Are we going to paddle? And then we put it in, and there's the boat. And he says, well, let's get a trolling motor. And so we get a trolling motor and put it in, and on our way, he's like, oh, we need a battery for the trolling motor. I'm like, yeah, okay. You know, it's getting later and later, and he decides, you know what, we got to catch some fish. Let's just go. We'll figure it out. We pull up. I'm like, what's he going to do? And he pops the hood, and he begins to take out his truck battery. And he says, Aaron, do you have any pliers? And I'm like, I have a bag, and look, I have my wife's pink and rusted little line cutters. And he goes, that'll work. I'm like, really? So we pull this battery out using these rusted pink pliers, and he pulls it out, and how do we connect the battery to the source? As he looks for an extension cord in his car, he cuts the extension cord. He's not an electrician, and he wires this up, and he's like, all right, this will work. I'm like, oh my gosh, something bad's going to happen. And we get in the boat, and we fish all day. There you see it. It really happened. If you look close enough, you'll see that is actually smoking because it's not supposed to be hooked up that way, and we're close to running it dead. It didn't matter to Mike, because to Mike, fishing was all that mattered at all costs, even if it meant we couldn't drive home that day. As you see, that is the face of a man serious to catch some fish. But this is the same intensity Jesus had in mind for the church. The first and only time Jesus actually uses the word we call church, it's a Greek word, ekklesia, and it means body of believers. And in Matthew 16, 15 to 19, Jesus said to them, but who do you say that I am? Simon Peter replied, you are the Christ, you're the Son of the living God. And Jesus answered him, blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah, for flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my Father who is in heaven. And I tell you, you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. I used to think that meant, all right, so hell is like attacking us, but key word here is gates, because gates are stagnant, which means the opposing structure is moving, which means the church is not a fortress. The church is a force. You see, we can keep our beliefs about the cross and the resurrection to ourselves, and we can be a fortress Christian. Or we can use the cross and the resurrection for what it was meant to be used for, which is a means to get us fishing. We so easily focus so much on the cross and resurrection as if that's the thing that Jesus came to do. That was his main work. And so it's surprising when we read Jesus' prayer in John 17 when he says, Father, I've brought you glory on earth by finishing the work you gave me to do. And now, Father, glorify me in your presence with the glory I had with you before the world began. I have revealed you to those whom you gave me out of the world. How does he finish the work God gave him to do before he ever goes on the cross? Other than the fact that the cross and the resurrection would just enhance and continue what he was already doing. Mobilizing fishers of men. The purpose of the cross and the resurrection was not to serve as an end, but to serve as a means to an end of continued discipleship. It's the cross and the resurrection that gives us the power and the ability and the desire to be fishers of men today. It was the doorway for fishing, like Jesus demonstrated with them. And it's a life-changing perspective for us. In fact, it's the one thing that gets us from being a fortress to being this force. In John 21, this repeated miracle between Jesus and Peter and some other disciples of them, and this miraculous catch of fish. And the timing of it is interesting because it's after the resurrection has taken place, and yet Peter's not moving. It's within him. He's being a fortress. He's already seen Jesus 2 times. He knows that he's resurrected, but yet he's not out moving and telling people about it. In fact, he's kind of withdrawing, and he said, let's go fishing, guys. And why is he in this state other than he is stuck in disappointment at himself? He's stuck in shame, as he knows he had recently just denied Jesus, who knows everything. Jesus knows that he denied him. Even when Peter said, even if I have to die with you, I won't deny you, and yet he still does. As he learned what Jesus knew all along, is that you can either deny yourself or you'll end up denying me. And so he's in shame and disappointment. And so Jesus shows up to kind of mend Peter's net so that he can get moving again. Because Jesus knew that catching people is not effective unless you know the effects of what you're catching them with. You can try to sell me on essential oils all day long. I'll never buy them. But when I hear there's one that's like, it'll calm you down and you'll be able to stand still, I'm like, okay, I'll take 10. It's all about the effects. And so Jesus is working on Peter to move him in John 21, and he moves him to revive his purpose, to redeem him from his shame, and to redirect his focus. So here it is. Peter says, I'm going fishing. And they said to him, we will go with you. They went out, they got into the boat. That night they caught nothing. Repeat. Just as day was breaking, Jesus stood on the shore, yet the disciples did not know that it was Jesus. Jesus said to them, children, do you have any fish? They answered him, no. He said to them, cast the net on the right side of the boat, and you will find some. So they cast it, and now they were not able to haul it in because of the quantity of fish. That disciple whom Jesus loved therefore said to Peter, it is the Lord. When Simon Peter heard it was the Lord, he put on his outer garment, for he stripped for work, and he threw himself into the sea. Didn't care about the fish. He's in excitement because you know immediately when he catches this miraculous fish, sees it as the Lord, he's connecting it back to his beginning where Jesus believed in him and called him to be this fisherman. So Peter gets there, revived with his purpose. And Jesus says, when they got out on the land, they saw a charcoal fire in place with fish laid on it and bread. This charcoal fire Remember, the New Testament's written in Greek, so this one word for charcoal fire, the other time it's used is the charcoal fire Peter was standing around when he denied Jesus 3 times. Jesus bringing it all here, front and center. So Jesus already has fish laid on it and bread. And he says to them, bring some of the fish that you have just caught. So Simon Peter went aboard and he hauled the net ashore, full of large fish, 153 of them. And although there were so many, the net was not torn. This is really interesting because Jesus already had fish on the fire. And so what happened is when they got to the shore with their nets full of fish, they did what they did in the beginning. They dropped their nets to go and be with Jesus. And they get to be with Jesus, like, all right, let's eat. And just like, wait, go get the net. And I love how John records this because when Peter runs back to the boat, it says he hauls out this net full of large fish, 153, and although there were so many, the net did not tear because we all know physics. If you've ever been fishing, but you didn't have a picture to show the giant fish that you caught, it's because you tried to pull it out of the water and your line broke. That's at least happened to me quite often. And so he's astonished at physics just being defied here, that there's a whole entire catch, which is very different than at the beginning when their nets were breaking. And you see, then Jesus did say, drop your nets and follow me. But here, go pick up your net and see that it's still useful. And be confident in the power of that net and see that the catch is now complete. So every detail of these 2 miracles is pointing to them as fishers of men. And here it's all about the effects of the resurrection and what Jesus is now calling them to do, to pick up their nets and to have a complete catch where none get away, that the resurrection doesn't miss anyone. So John 21 verse 12, Jesus said to them, come and have breakfast. So when they had finished breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? He said to him, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. He asked him a second time. He says, I love you. Jesus says, shepherd my sheep. Then the third time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Peter's grieved because he said to him the third time, questioning his devotion. Peter says, Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you. And Jesus said to him, feed my sheep. This word grieved meant deep and severe emotional pain because he's remembering how he denied Jesus even when Jesus said he wouldn't. When he told Jesus he wouldn't, and yet he still did. And yet Jesus replaces his shame, this thing that is keeping him stuck, this self-doubt, with him getting to state 3 times his devotion. But his devotion wasn't it. Us being devoted to God, it wasn't it. Saying we love him is not enough. Believing in him is not enough. Jesus says, okay, if you love me, be a force for me. Feed my sheep. Take care of my people. Be a fisher of men. Jesus goes on to say, truly I say to you, when you were young, you used to dress yourself and walk wherever you wanted. But when you are old, you'll stretch out your hands and another will dress you, carry you where you do not want to go. This he said to show by what kind of death he was to glorify God. Why did he deny Jesus before? It's because he was afraid that he would die, that he would get caught and die. Jesus like, let me just tell you how this story ends. You're going to die. It's going to be bad. Suffering is involved. Follow me. And then Peter looks around and he sees John falling. He's like, well, that's a pretty bad death. What about this guy? What about John? He's like, hey, if it's my will that he remain until I come, what is that to you? Don't worry. You follow me. This is where Jesus is redirecting his focus off of himself compared to others, off of himself compared to suffering, and you follow me. So you can pick up your net. Last time I threw a cast net, I was in St. Pete at the Skyway Pier, and we only went there maybe one time a year with some other fellow fishermen. And the net I had there was a 7-foot cast net, pretty big. And I was excited to use it because when I looked over the pier, I saw like hundreds, if not thousands of fish. Like I could see a big clout of of green big fish, and I couldn't see the bottom of when they ended. And so I'm excited, and I asked the guy with me, I was like, hey, can I use this net? He's like, yeah, totally. And so I'm like, okay. And I grab the net, and I look over, and the method is, it's kind of weird if you've never thrown a cast net, but you kind of foot your mouth, and I get the net, and dang it! I didn't attach the net to my arms. I'm like, Joe, I'm so sorry. No, fish were caught. That cast was pointless. I had the excitement. Just as Peter has the excitement to follow Jesus, I'll die for you. I'll be the first to get out of the water and get out of the boat and walk on water. You're the Christ. You're the Son of the living God. We see this all throughout the pattern of Peter's life, that he's excited to follow Jesus, but Jesus knew this one thing that was continually causing Peter to not be effective, and that he wouldn't be effective when he did start fishing for him. And that is the denial of self. That he wasn't fully attached to the selfless love that Jesus was all about. We see Jesus call Peter a hindrance after Peter had just called him the Christ, the Son of the living God. Just like, blessed are you. And then Jesus starts saying, the Son of Man, he's going to be arrested and he's going to be killed. But on the third day, he's going to rise. And Peter responds and says, no, you will not. This will not happen. Far be it from you. And Jesus says, get behind me, Satan. You are a hindrance to me, for you are not setting your mind on the things of God, but on the things of man. If anyone would come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. For whoever would save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. Peter's hindrance is the same as mine, where I'm so focused on the suffering and I miss the excitement of him resurrecting. And so I struggle to cast this selfless love and experience the resurrection. And yet, it's not just about being selfless, because if we're just selfless, then we'll just fish as if it's our job. All right, I'm supposed to follow Jesus. I'll reach out to people. I'll love people. Do it because it's my job, what he calls you. But if you do it with an excitement, and specifically this resurrection excitement, then I'm approaching the waters like there's something out there. Oh, there's something big coming. Can't see it right now. But you have this hope and this optimism, this excitement about you. And so, how do I be a faithful fisher of men? It is this resurrection excitement, but it's also being attached to this selfless love of Jesus that helps us cast selfless love on others so that they also experience the effects of the resurrection. That remove the sting of death, that remove the effects of sin. And I'm free, that because of the resurrection, I can be free from loneliness and frustration and depression and selfishness and anxiety and hatred because of the resurrection. And so that excites me to cast this net, let me do it right this time, of selfless love like pops from heaven. As I see others around me also catch in this excitement, because if we look at one other miracle that Jesus just about repeated in close detail, was the feeding of the 5,000, the feeding of the 4,000. What state were the people in? Starving, had nothing. What state does Jesus show up to Peter and the other disciples in their fishing experience? When they were catching nothing. Jesus has a heart full of compassion, and he sees people who really have nothing, whose hearts are starving for hope and for joy and for peace and for answers. And we as followers showing that we also see with the same heart of compassion. Because going out of our way, it is the caveat, going out of our way to meet others' needs doesn't really meet any of our needs. If it's selfless love, what's our benefit? Again, that's why Peter couldn't deny himself. He saw that all the time. Wait, I'm going to suffer Peter was so focused on the suffering. He missed the benefit. The benefit was the resurrection within him. And so what benefit we get to see is that when we throw this net and we get to see people experience this cast of selfless love from a resurrection excitement, seeing their response, seeing how the effects hit them, that just increases my resurrection excitement to continue casting and to continue catching. When I catch some fish, I'm like, there's more fish out there, let's keep catching. That's the benefit, that I have an increased experience of the resurrection. If I'm not excited, if I'm not moving, then I haven't been casting. Or maybe I have, and it's casting like it's my job. And not from a resurrection excitement. So it's time that we all as the church pick up our nets. Maybe for you that is similar to Peter. You need a revival. And yeah, Jesus said the body of believers. So the church revival, it's really dependent on you and your revival and me and my revival. To have a revived purpose, you have a mission in whatever environment you're in. To be redeemed from whatever shame or disappointment we have about ourselves. And to have this redirected focus to see that we have everything we need to follow him. You see, what's interesting about Peter is he gets casting after the Holy Spirit comes down on them. And then he preaches and stands up and 3,000 get saved that day because, yes, it's us attached to his selfless love. And yes, it's us, kind of swinging with the resurrection and the excitement. But the net is the power of the Holy Spirit. The gift of the Holy Spirit, that is the effect of the resurrection. Our nets aren't torn because of that. We can have confidence with that kind of net. That's useful. That completes the catch. It's interesting that, what I'm talking about is that this is a fishing experience is typically an introvert's activity. If I want to get away, as Peter did, is I withdraw and I go find a lake where there's no people to go fishing. And Jesus takes this introvert activity into what seems like an extrovert mission. But the disciples aren't all extroverts. We see it from Peter, like, oh, Peter's the one that's moving. Peter's an extrovert. But Peter's brother, Andrew, is the one who introduced Jesus to Peter. And no matter if you're an introvert or an extrovert, we all have this one thing in common, and that is that we love excitement. You do. And that was what was so evidenced from Jesus at the very beginning of both catches, that excitement and astonishment came with it. It was already happening before Jesus got out in the boat. The people are pressing in on him because they're so excited to just hear God's word from him. And he's like, let me get in this boat. That was amazing. And so we have this excitement. And so understand, you being in excitement is not you, trying to act like an extrovert or a clown. Sometimes I get called that. But it's just to take the effects of what Jesus has given you and let them be seen outside of you. That is the excitement, and that is the church being a force when all the followers are fishing. We let go of the excuses. Some of us, that is fishing on the right side of the boat, what's close by. That's what we see in the church, right? Opportunities to do that. You can be in a life group, or you can be involved in a ministry. But we also see that Jesus called them to be casting in the deep waters, where it's kind of scary and uncertain. We need nets flying there too. On January 20th, we actually have a life group leader training. And you may hear that and be like, oh gosh, just life groups? No, it's about teaching us that say, okay, I'm a follower, I'm picking up my net. How do I do that in the world around me, the community around me? Some of you, I think it is within here that your next step is you're going to lead a life group of people within the church. But some of you, it's actually your next step where you're going to say, okay, I'll pick up a net and I'll lead a group of people that will never step foot inside church. Casting in the deep. Casting on the right side, whatever it be, but we are called to be casting, to be fishers of men, and to understand that the church is not Sunday. Acts 2, they attended the temple, but we saw the effects of the resurrection. We saw the church as a movement every other day. of the week together. And so the church, yeah, we get to come together and man, praise like that and be reminded together. Oh yeah, I need my net repaired every once in a while. But we ourselves as a movement to go outside of these walls, say within these walls, also share, man, if you're starving for hope or for love or for joy, that it's all in Jesus. It's this selfless love that I'm attached to, that there's no reason I deserve this. I denied you 3 times. You said that I would. I mean, Peter's at the lowest of low. You're not worse than Peter. He's with him for 3 years. He saw everything he did, and yet he still denied him. Because it all has in common the same thing, all of our sin, and let's just focus on the self. We can pierce through the suffering, through this excitement, this victory of the resurrection. So what does it look like for you to get casting? Give your neighbor a grocery card today. That's casting selfless love, okay. You feed a meal as Jesus showed us right there. Free food is effective. Life group leader training, by the way, we'll have free food. It's just feeding somebody in your neighborhood, inviting a neighbor you haven't had before. That's casting selfless love. Going out to greet, to put smiles on your faces, to make people confused, to be like, wait, I thought Chick-fil-A was closed on Sunday. Why are there so many people? Such an incredible guest experience. Giving a kid a high five, dancing with them. I mean, whatever it be, using your gift. There's so many people, and we're hiding the things that, as if we're really feeding, but we're starving. And I know that exists in my neighborhood where there's people who are struggling with things that are shameful, like finances, and not being able to pay for certain things. And what if somebody's casting a net where you're starting this Facebook community page and you're just letting people know door by door, like, hey, there's this page, you can message me. We want to meet these hard to meet needs. Casting in a selfless love. Here's the thing, whatever it is, it's got to come from a resurrection excitement within you, where you understand the effects of what Jesus has done. Because that is what gets you casting, and that is what causes the church to gain what it was never meant to lose, which is momentum. All of us fishing together, it's not hard, we just cast. He brings the catch. We just be faithful, throwing selfless love. And it goes back to the first church, right, where they had this humility to learn, this dependency on prayer, no pride in their differences, and a daily agenda to advance God's catch. Because if there's no momentum, we aren't operating as the church at all. And we get fooled into thinking it's 1 or 2 nets that are supposed to be fishing. Oh, he's just calling Peter to be fishing. So when Peter did say, you're the Christ, the Son of the living God, and Jesus said, blessed are you, and he gives him a new name. He says, you are now Peter. And on this rock, I will build my church. Some of us know that Peter, the word there means rock. And so we say, oh, the church is built on Peter as a fisher of men. But the Greek word, Peter, is Petros, which is boulder or a detached rock. So you are now Peter, Petros. And on this Petra, which is a collection of rocks, I will build my church. And so Peter, yeah, boom, you're the boulder, and many more like you. This collection of rocks that are saying, you're the Christ, the Son of the living God, and we're inspired from our Father in heaven, not flesh and blood. That is the church as a force that is ransacking hell. As a movement, pick up our nets. It's 2019. It's time for something